Am I ever going to use you? Should I keep working on this or frog it? Do I even like you? Why am I talking out loud to my yarn stash? This is episode 2 of my 12-part series, Untangling the Stash. Today we are tackling decluttering your yarn stash. This is yarn clutter. I've had this yarn so long, it's practically a fossil. So let's dive into decluttering our stashes together and keep the crying and stress to a minimum. Okay, yarn dragons, let's discuss why decluttering can feel so daunting. There's the guilt over the lovely yarn that you bought but never used. The sentimental value of skeins that you inherited from your grandma, and the ever-present fear of not having the right yarn on hand for those potential future projects. You know what I'm talking about. Oof, that cuts to the bone, Oscar. The first thing we need to do is analyze what we have, then sort it using the 3 piles system. Keep, donate, frog or finish. We're going to keep it if it's dragon bait treasure and we have a specific project in mind. We're going to donate it if it's good quality but just not your style anymore. We're going to frog it if it's part of a project that didn't work out for any reason and the yarn will still be usable by you or someone else. And we will finish it if it's so close to completion that you know you can FO that sucker in a couple of hours, or that you completely forgot you had it and are now back in love with it, which may or may not be the case with this piece. Okay, we've got our game plan. Let's prepare for the sorting. In The Joy of Yarn, Marie Green suggests pulling out all of your yarn and putting it in one place. This is what I did last year. You can do this if you like. Have a defibrillator standing by. But if you don't have the space or can't cope with the impact of seeing all of your yarn in one pile, yarn dragons accepted, of course, you don't have to do that. I am going to deal with my stash one bin, drawer, shelf at a time this year, just to keep it more manageable. What you will need is a way to separate it into the 3 piles. They don't have to be literal piles, but they do need to be separated somehow. I'm going to use my white mesh IKEA baskets, but you can use laundry baskets, clear recycling bags, whatever large clean containers you might have on hand. Next month, we are going to organize the yarn that we decide to keep into categories like color, weight, fiber, project. You can start thinking about those categories as you sort. Jot down notes as the ideas come to you. For instance, I'm a knitting educator as well as a maker, and I will have categories that you probably won't have, like yarns for technical demonstration, mohair alternative yarns, that is a video coming soon, wool-free yarns, yep, another video, stuff like that. I'm also going to keep a bin for charity or fundraising knitting projects. You might discover that you have your very own categories. Share them in the comments to give everybody some great ideas. I started with the easy group first, the dragon bait. These are the yarns that I know absolutely 100% that I would cast on tomorrow if I let myself cast on all the things at once. Don't get too focused on having a specific project in mind for every skein. If you really, really love it, keep it. There will be at least 3 episodes over the course of the series this year that will focus on how to use your various dragon bait treasures, no matter how little you have of that super special yarn. Here is my first dragon bait bin. Yep, there's a fair bit of Totally Nicole Blue in there. And this one is even called Green Dragon. While I was sorting through my stash yesterday, I discovered this single ball of fun fur yarn that I picked up at a yarn swap last year. I picked it up for two reasons. One, because it's unbelievably soft. And two, because I thought I could make something for Oscar. So last night I grabbed my 10mm needles and I knit Oscar a stole. I gave it to him. I'm not sure if he likes it. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. This gorgeous little cluster of minis was a kit that I bought specifically to knit the Think Like an Artist cowl. It's a stranded knit infinity cowl, and I'm so mosaic knitting focused these days that I'm not sure I'm going to knit that project, but I love this group of minis together so much that I am keeping them because looking at them and contemplating what they could be definitely floats my boat. Moving on to our donate or sell pile. These are the yarns that are still in great condition, but I know deep down that I'm not going to use them. It's time they find a new home where they will be loved and used. Thanks, Oscar. Let's take a look at some of mine and why I made these decisions to give up these particular yarns. I'm not going to go through them all. I haven't even sorted through all of my yarn yet, but I'll give you some examples. These guys right here are fantastic ancient arts yarns that were specifically dyed and sold by River City Yarns in Edmonton. They're called Hat Trick, and they are based on the colors of hockey teams. These are Vancouver, BC colors, and this one is in the colors of the Edmonton Oilers. I had decided to give them all up, but I think I'm actually going to keep the Vancouver ones. I have to admit about feeling pretty sentimental about River City Yarns, and I have been a Vancouver Canucks fan for most of my adult life. The Edmonton one I bought because Mr. Handsome and I have some ties to Edmonton, but the reality is I'm probably never going to knit this one. I'm pretty sure there are lots of Edmonton Oilers fans who would love to have this particular skein of yarn. I'll have to think of a way to get it to someone particularly worthy. This bundle of yarns is a craftsy kit that I bought to knit Zandy Peters' Fox Paws scarf. If you're not familiar with Zandy Peters, they designed this very intriguing technique of stacked stitches. I probably should have added it in my last video as one of the hardest colorwork techniques out there. It's very challenging. I've always wanted to knit this just to knit it, and I'm relatively inspired by this colorway, but the reality is it would strictly be a process knit. I probably would never actually use the finished product. And considering the amount of time and energy that would go into creating this, I'm just not sure that's something I can build into my knitting plans anytime soon. So it's time to give this one up. I can always get the pattern and knit it out of new yarn somewhere down the road if I decide I really need to do it. Decision made. That feels good. By donating the yarns that don't serve us anymore, we can support local arts and crafts classes and bring joy to other crafters. You can gift your yarn to a friend or a guild, donate to a senior center or a care home, women's shelters, schools, organizations that have knitting or crochet charity programs. The list is really endless, and it will make you feel good about having purchased all that yarn and now being able to pass it on. Or, of course, you can resell your yarn. Ravelry has a swap or sell feature in the stash area, and I've seen folks selling yarns on social media platforms like Facebook Marketplace. Keep in mind that selling takes time and energy, so make sure to do a cost-benefit analysis, even if it's just in your head, to be sure that you understand the non-monetary costs of selling your yarn. You may decide that it's not worth it and that you get more out of donating it. And while we're on the subject, let's talk about sunk cost bias. Here's an example. I bought these Northlight Fibers yarns in 2020, and they were pretty spendy. Northlight Fibers actually had a mill on Rhode Island. They have since shut down the mill and are no longer making this yarn. And it really makes me feel like I invested a fair bit of money in the yarn, and if I let it go, I can't replace it. But the reality is, when the yarn arrived, the colors weren't exactly what I was expecting, and that's not the fault of Northlight Fibers. That can happen when you order yarns online because of the variation in the photography and monitors and all that kind of stuff. Instead of being turquoise, this yarn is blue with some green twisted into it. And this yarn was much warmer and creamier than I expected. Same with this one. I thought it was going to be a more neutral natural. This is quite yellow. So I swatched for the project I was going to use it for, but it just didn't do it for me. The yarn is a cotton merino blend, and it's really, really lovely. I just need to let go of the feeling that I have too much invested in it, both emotionally and financially. True, but it's yarn equity, Oscar. Yarn equity. And letting go of it feels like I'm tossing out a piece of my knitting soul, even though I'll probably never use it. So is it dragon bait, or is it time to cut my losses and move on? That's the real question. All right, fine. It's time to let it go. I've also created a temporary fourth category, second runners up. These are yarns that I need to interrogate before sentencing. Who are you? What are you made of? Are you dragon bait? The trick to dealing with this group is to not spend too much time with each yarn. Let your spidey senses make the decision. The toughest question might be, will I regret letting you go? If the answer is yes, keep it for now. If the answer is no, I could replace this if I needed to, consider letting it move along to a new home. And finally, the frog or finish pile. I said that I would discover some forgotten whips, and boy howdy did I. These are learning experiences, aren't they? Projects that didn't quite turn out, or the yarn that just didn't work. Don't spend a ton of time reliving what went wrong with these projects or getting stuck in the past on the hours you spent getting it to that point. Just leave the past in the past. Let's take a look at some of mine. This one, which I had completely forgotten about, was a no-brainer. I have one beautiful fingerless mitt already finished and one that is halfway done. An hour or two, and these guys are finished and ready to go. Keep, finish. Now this one, however, was me trying to be clever and take the pressed flowers motif that Amy Christoffers brilliantly invented and try to use it in a fingerless mitt. A+ for idea, C for execution, frog. This guy was a swatch for a cardigan I thought I was going to design. That was 10 years ago. I don't think it's going to happen. Just kind of a cool motif though, right? It's from one of Andrea Rangel's alternate books. Still, frog. And this one, I thought I was so close to finishing this. I had these three done. I picked this project back up a while ago. I did one more red one for the back. I needed to do one more gray one for the front. Got most of the way through this one and realized it was coming out way bigger than my original squares. I was dumbfounded as to why. So even an hour ago, I was on the verge of scrapping this whole thing and frogging it. When I looked at it and realized that what I had done was double the yarn that shouldn't have been doubled. I doubled the red and the light gray yarns in these samples to get the yarn up to the weight I needed, completely forgetting that I didn't need to double the dark gray yarn. Had I looked a little more closely at this one, I could have figured that out. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to frog this, reknit it at the right gauge, sew these together, and then rather than knitting 3 more squares for the back, I'm going to Tunisian crochet the back. Sew it up, stuff a pillow form in it, Bob's your ex-husband. So this project is getting both frogged and finished. While you are in this process of sorting and frogging and reclaiming and winding up and tidying your yarns, I've got 2 pro tips for you. First, go watch my video on refreshing unraveled yarn. That video will teach you how to turn this into this. It's really not a great idea to knit with your yarn when it's like this. I'm getting away with it here because I'm doing garter stitch, and so the kinkiness of this yarn is sort of going to blend in anyway. But you really want to take this and make it all smooth and brand new for most of your projects. The link to the video is up there. And second is how to deal with those yarn ends on your hand wound or partly used balls and cakes of yarn. I saw this hack somewhere recently and just immediately thought it was brilliant. Get yourself some of these snappy hair clips. I got these relatively cheap at a drugstore. You could probably get them even cheaper at a dollar store. Unsnap the clippy clip to make a little mouth, and then just pop it over the end and snap it shut. Secure and no snagging. And for extra credit, you could take your ball band and snap that in there with it. Game changer, right? I'm a big fan of this hack. There you have it, Yarn Dragons. Decluttering your stash without the emotional overload. I still have a lot of work to do here, but I'm motivated to get it done so that I can move on to organizing it into categories in the next episode of this series. In the meantime, I double dog dare you to tackle your own stash and try the 3 piles method. Share your experiences in the comments. Let's inspire each other and make room for new projects and new yarn that we're truly excited about. Until next time, keep those needles clicking and your yarn tidy. I say goodbye, Oscar says goodbye, and here's a link to a playlist of all my stash management videos. Don't cry over spilt yarn, and we'll see you next time. Bye!